We now know that the NHL plans to release all 31 NHL teams, or actually I guess it's all 30 NHL teams because Vegas is exempt, but they plan to release all of the protection lists on July 18th, so a couple of days before the actual expansion draft. My plan is to upload my final Seattle expansion mock draft on either the 19th or the 20th, most likely the 20th though, so one day before the actual draft takes place. But until then, we got some time to kill, so I'm going to make some videos going over specific teams, protection lists, what I think they could look like, make some predictions. As you can tell, we're going to be starting off with the Red Wings, and you guys can let me know down below in the comment section if you want to see this for some other teams over the next week or so. Just from being on Twitter the past couple of weeks, I know that there are a lot of fans out there from specific teams that are kind of worried about who their team could potentially lose to Seattle. Me, on the other hand, as a Red Wings fan, I don't think I could be any less worried about who Detroit is going to lose. The Red Wings are still very much so in the midst of a rebuild. They don't have an abundance of good players, and the good players that Detroit does have, there's plenty of protection spots for those guys. That being said though, let's get into my predictions for Detroit's protection list. First things first, I definitely think they're going to go with the 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie approach, opposed to 4 forwards, 4 defensemen, and 1 goalie, and I think it's going to be that way for the majority of teams with the exception of a couple. I'll start off with the goalie because this is a guarantee. Detroit is going to protect Thomas Greiss over Caden Fulcher. If the Red Wings do plan on re-signing Jonathan Bernier, which I definitely hope they do, they don't have to worry about protecting him because when they re-sign him, it'll likely be after the expansion draft. I think there's going to be a lot of under the table, handshake agreements before the expansion draft, and then we'll see contracts be finalized afterwards. It just makes sense. It's the smart thing to do. So whether Jonathan Bernier is a Red Wing next season or not, Thomas Greiss is going to be the goalie that gets protected. Now moving on to the 3 defensemen. To me, there's only one defenseman on Detroit that is basically guaranteed a spot on the protection list, and that is Filip Hronek. In each of the past 2 seasons, he's been Detroit's top minute-eating defenseman. He's been the top scoring defenseman in each of the past 2 seasons as well. He's only 23 years old. He's going to get protected for sure. Now, after Hronek is where you can go a couple of different ways. On my protection list, I have Troy Stecher. Now, the reason that I don't think he's a guarantee to be protected like Filip Hronek is because I don't think Jeff Blashill is the biggest fan of Troy Stecher. He was a healthy scratch on multiple occasions this season, and I could also see a scenario where Steve Yzerman just wants to go with protecting 3 young defensemen, and he protects Hronek, Cholowski, and Lindstrom. I'll be pretty upset if Stecher is left unprotected though. I really like the way he played this past season, and I just think he's too valuable to be left unprotected, especially when you consider Detroit doesn't really have a lot of valuable defensemen. Even if Steve Yzerman doesn't view Stecher as a part of the team moving forward, this is a guy who has 1 year left on his contract and could be a very valuable asset at the trade deadline next season. And Stecher isn't all that old either. He's like, 26 years old right now? This is a guy who could realistically see the entire rebuild through, so I think he has to be protected. Now, after Hronek and Stecher, it comes down to 2 guys, Dennis Cholowski and Gustav Lindstrom, still both relatively young. Cholowski a first-round pick in 2016, Lindstrom a second-round pick in 2017. Between those two, if I'm being honest, I really don't care. I don't view either of those guys as big parts of Detroit's future, or if they're going to be a part of it at all. On my protection list, I'm going to go with Cholowski over Lindstrom. My sole reason is because Cholowski has a lot more offensive upside than Gustav Lindstrom, and Detroit doesn't really have a power play quarterback. It's been Filip Hronek for the past couple of seasons, but I'm not a huge fan of him in that role, so that's basically my only reason as to why I want Cholowski back over Lindstrom. I think he should be Detroit's power play quarterback on the top unit if it's not Seider. So now we move on to the forwards, and I'll get the first 4 out of the way immediately. Dylan Larkin, Jacob Vrana, Robbie Fabry, and Tyler Bertuzzi. Those 4 are all locks to be protected. After those 4 though, for the final 3 spots, I'm honestly really curious to see what Steve Yzerman is going to do. The 5th forward that I have on my protection list is Adam Ernie. I think he deserves it after the way he played this past season. He was tied for the Red Wings team leading goals with Anthony Mantha. He showed that he can be a value on the special teams. I think this is a guy who can be a really good bottom 6 forward for Detroit, not just now, but also moving forward into the future. Similar to what I said when talking about Troy Stecher, Adam Ernie isn't young anymore, but he's also not all that old. He's 26 or 27. That's a guy that could see the rebuild through, and when Detroit's good again, be a nice bottom 6 checking forward with some finishing ability. So I have Larkin, Vrana, Fabry, Bertuzzi, and Ernie. Next, I think Detroit is going to protect Michael Rasmussen. I mean, I feel like they kind of have to, right? He was a top 10 pick in the 2017 draft. He's only 22, and he did show a lot of improvement this past season, I will say that. I really think that the injury to Larkin was a blessing in disguise for Rasmussen. He was able to play the center position much higher in the lineup than he was early on in the season. Do I think Rasmussen is ever going to live up to being the 9th overall pick back in the 2017 draft? No, of course not, but I definitely think he's worth protecting. So that now leaves us with 1 forward spot remaining, and I think this one comes down to Evgeny Svechnikov, Vlad Nemesnikov, and Giovanni Smith. I'm not going to go with Giovanni Smith just because if he is left unprotected, I don't think there's all that high of a chance Seattle even selects him, so we're going to leave him unprotected. So now it's between Svechnikov and Nemesnikov, and it hurts me to do this, but I'm going to leave Svechnikov unprotected and going with protecting Nemesnikov here. And again, it just goes back to a value thing. I think Nemesnikov can be a nice trade asset at the deadline next season, and when it comes to Svechnikov's value, well, he doesn't really have any. Yeah, he's a former first round pick, and yeah, he's a lot younger than Nemesnikov, but this is a guy who was on waivers multiple times this past season and went unclaimed. Any team in the league could have taken him for free, and nobody did. It's not like he makes a lot of money either. He makes under 900k. I love Svechnikov. I'm rooting for him, and part of me honestly hopes he is left unprotected and Seattle scoops him up just to give him a fresh start and a new opportunity. So those are my Red Wings protection list predictions for the 2010 What?
Figure it out. Seems simple to me. I don't know.
So those are my predictions for Detroit's protection list for the 2021 Seattle Expansion Draft. If you guys are a Red Wings fan like me and you have some differing opinions, be sure to let me know down below in the comments section. And based off of the protection list that I have here, if you were Seattle, who would you take? Would you go with a guy like Evgeny Svechnikov or maybe a young defenseman like Gustav Lindstrom? And also, if you want to see some more videos like this on some other teams before we get the actual protection lists from every team, then be sure to let me know that as well. I do plan on doing one of these for the Minnesota Wild in the next couple of days, just because they're in a pretty interesting spot with all the no movement clauses that they have.